Hey everyone, my name is Ben Murphy, and on today's show we have John Warren joining us. He is a mortgage lender with A+ Mortgage. He's a real estate investor. He's a husband. He's a father to 3 children, and he's an amazing person in general. So welcome to the show, John.
How's it going?
Another day in paradise. I took that line from you.
Oh, dude. It's my favorite.
How's it going for you?
It's the weather took a turn for the worse, so it's been so sunny and awesome, so it definitely correlated with another day in paradise lately.
Yeah, I hear you, brother. Today we actually had a pretty fun day so far. I mean, we just closed on our first investment property together.
Yes, we did.
So that's going to be a really fun one. I'm excited about it just because I've actually never done a renovation before.
Mm-hmm.
I know you've been through a bunch of them.
Feel that?
This is going to be a first for me, and maybe we'll have to shoot another episode after we get through that whole thing.
Yeah, that would be cool. We got to make sure to take enough before and after photos. I
yeah.
always sucked at that.
That's all right. You got me now, so we can do that. We'll do that part together. So, John, let's start with a couple things. There's a lot I want to hit on today, and we only have a certain amount of time. So I want to start talking about, first off, let's talk a little bit of business. So, John, you're a mortgage lender with A+ Mortgage.
Yes.
And I'm a real estate agent with Keller Williams, and we do a lot of work together. We talk to a lot of different people, mainly buyers. That's our bread and butter together, especially internet leads. So when we're talking to these people, a lot of the conversations I'm running into right now are, hey, we definitely want to buy, but we're thinking 6 to 12 months down the road, or when interest rates drop. They want to wait until the rates drop. So when you hear that, what are the first things that come to your mind? And what would you recommend to somebody who's in that boat?
It's a great question, right? We basically 2 years ago were at 2s and 3s,
Mm-hmm.
and now we're at 6s and 7s. So for your average consumer, that's like, holy smokes, on top of how much real estate prices have accelerated up and up and up year after year. So it puts a lot of pressure on our buyers, right? And so part of it is we all hope that it's going to get better. And as we know, historically, 2 things, right? Real estate prices tend to always go up.
Mm-hmm.
We had that temporary blimp from 2008 to 2012.
Right.
But even if interest rates come down, it may not offset how much that house goes up. If you're looking at 500 and now it's 550, that $50,000 more on the loan might offset a lower interest rate. So that's one thing that I like to bring people to, because there is a cost of waiting, and it is real dollars and cents. The other part is with interest rates is no one has a crystal ball. We can all give our projections, but where it is today is the only thing we can guarantee. So it's not to say that interest rate won't be a whole % higher in a month from now. And most of the data that we have from the Federal Reserve tells us that interest rates are here to stay. Yes, we hear a lot of news, right, that the Fed is going to cut rates. It's like a trigger word, and everybody thinks that means mortgage rates are coming down. But really, that rate that they're cutting is the federal funds rate,
Mm-hmm.
which is bank-to-bank lending. Everybody has to have so much on their balance sheets at the end of the day, and so they borrow from another bank. Now, because their costs are cheaper, it doesn't mean that they pass that directly to the consumer.
Mm-hmm.
So if we look at a historical chart, the market is really comfortable between 6 and 7%. So if we're waiting for interest rates to come down, I don't know what that means, in the sense that 2s and 3s were a market anomaly that will most likely never happen again in my lifetime.
Dang.
I know. I should have bought more property.
Right, same. Oh, man. You brought up a really good point, though. No one has a crystal ball. And that's one of the reasons that I really like working with you. I have a whole lot of them. is that you always give it to me straight and you don't BS me with hopium. So I get a lot of misinformation from other lenders out there. And, as a real estate agent, I'm on random email lists of lenders, and just I get calls and texts and emails and everything inundated with other lenders constantly saying things like rates are coming down this year. You can buy now, refinance later, which is always true. Like, I'm not denying the fact there. But typically the reason they're saying that is because, hey, buy now, yeah, the interest rate's higher, refinance later because rates are coming down. So what do you say to another lender that says, hey, rates are coming down later on this year?
Yeah, I think it all starts with customer expectation, right? If I start with that customer and the expectation is, hey, rates are going to get better, they're making their purchase decision based on a notion that I can't prove. Mm-hmm. And I can't, no one has that crystal ball. So setting the expectation is, I like to start out focusing on the monthly payment. Because if they can afford the monthly payment and they're comfortable, the interest rate doesn't necessarily matter. Mm-hmm. Because let's say they buy the house, right? And they feel like their interest rate's really high and they overpaid for the house. But 2 years later, they find out their house is worth more money and interest rates did happen to come down. They have the opportunity to refinance. Mm-hmm. So you're never losing when you buy. So a lot of lenders may set kind of an expectation that rates are coming down to try to ease that customer. But what I found is that creates an inverse, because then when it comes to writing that offer, how many clients start getting nervous once you start writing it and they would say, wait a minute, I want to look at this. And they see the interest rate and they're scared of that because the focus is on interest rate, not affordability and monthly payment. So if it's focused on that monthly payment and they're comfortable with that number, you give them the comfort that, hey, we can give you a better interest rates if they come down, but I'm not going to promise you that on the front end. You set that expectation, then they have so much more conviction when it comes to writing offers for you as an agent.
Yeah, 100%. And right now, I've been talking with my, clients and new potential buyer clients of, don't plan on these rates coming down after you buy. You need to buy something that you're going to be comfortable with now and that you're going to be comfortable with in the future. Because if you're saying, I'm buying this house right now, my rate is at 7%, but I know it's going to go down to 6% and we'll be okay when we can refinance. Well, you might be screwing your future self by doing that. So a lot of the conversations I've had is more around, get comfortable at this interest rate. And it honestly, some of the newer buyer clients I've talked to, it's pushed them away because they're like, well, if rates aren't coming down right now, then I don't want to buy. And that leads into other conversations. But I'd rather be honest with them and say, yeah, you better be getting used to these rates, rather than say, hey, you'll be able to refinance it down the road. So great points all around there. So another question I have in terms of buyers is, sometimes buyers think that they have to keep renting and save up all this money to buy a house. And they're afraid because, they're saving the money, and year after year, home prices are still going up. The interest rates are going up. And the people who have been waiting, they're not sure what to do. Should they keep waiting? Should they buy? They're unsure. So what would you just say to somebody who just isn't sure like what to do, and they think they have to save up a bunch of money to buy a house? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, it is a very common question. I mean, with the prices of homes going up, even doing a small down payment has become exponentially higher than 5 years ago. So, I mean, we have 3 programs that allow people to do little or no down payment, which include a VA loan, a USDA loan, and what's called a WIDA loan, which they basically will give you 100% financing so you can get in that home. Now, as a lender, it's amazing that we have programs like this, but I always take the time to educate the client on what that means, because the last thing we want to do is get someone in a house with zero money that has nothing in the bank,
Right.
because we all know what happens when that furnace goes.
Exactly.
Or some small problem. There is no reserves, which is going to put our clients in jeopardy of not being able to make their payments. So a lot of it comes down to, are they financially equipped from an income standpoint? Because if they make enough money, even though they don't have a ton of reserves, they can consistently pay that debt from that income. So, it just starts with that education, getting them comfortable, because a lot of people, their mindset is, well, I paid $1,600 rent, so I can afford a $1,600 mortgage. But there's other expenses, right? Those utilities, the water bills, everything else. So it just starts with that education, setting that expectation again, and then empowering that client to make that decision, because it's not my decision to make which program they choose. Mm-hmm. But if I educate them well and they have all the information to make that decision, then they can choose their risk tolerance.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up another good point, which is person buys a house and they have like no money in the bank. They were able to get in, very low down payment, and furnace goes out, right? So do you believe that in some situations it's better to rent than to buy a house? Because I've heard a lot of like lenders, realtors out there saying things like, oh, if you're renting, you're paying 100% interest rate, or you're just throwing money away. What are your thoughts on that instead?
Yeah, I mean, there is a lot of benefits to renting. One, there's very little maintenance that you have to do, which means you can rent a place, pay your $1,600, and that's all you're paying. Sometimes that includes cable, energy, even Netflix for some rentals. So it really comes down to what the customer is comfortable with and having a realistic expectation on what their future finances look like. Are they aware that they're going to have water bills? Are they aware of the maintenance of a property? Because you still have to cut lawns. You have to paint exteriors. There's concrete that settles and we have to fix that. There's so many different things that go into a property that it's not just $1,600 a month. So even though the mortgage says it's $1,600, it's not. It might be $19,000 or $2,000, and they're not looking at those costs because they're not accustomed to home ownership.
Right.
So for those individuals, it may be best to keep being a tenant from a financial standpoint because they aren't equipped to pay those extra expenses without going into more debt. And that's the last thing we want, right? We want to get people in houses when it makes sense to them and they accept the terms of home ownership. But we definitely want to steer clear of pushing someone into something that sets them up for failure. So we can educate, but we can't make the decision.
Yeah, exactly. At the end of the day, we can't make the decision. It's all in the hands of the buyer, and they come to us to help them do exactly what they want to do, which is to buy a home. But that's a great point. And I've thought about that a lot and talked to my clients a lot about it as well. Like, yeah, you see the number, your monthly number that you have to hit, your principal, interest, insurance, and taxes, that monthly mortgage. But it doesn't highlight the capital expenditures that you're ultimately going to have. So in my opinion, yes, it's always best to buy a home if you can, but that's if you can. You have to have money set aside for the repairs that you're going to come across. So thanks for your input on all that. And what I want to go into next is I want to talk a little bit about real estate investing. I've recently got into real estate investing. I now, as of today, have my second property. Yep, yes, sir. And I have one duplex before this one. So, but you, on the other hand, you have a pretty extensive real estate portfolio, and I don't even think I know all that entails. Do you mind going into that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I got to think about it too, because we added another one to the list, right? So, I mean, I guess going back to the beginning, my main motive in real estate investing is creating an income source to replace my income. because when I was younger, I was like, I don't even remember the exact year. I have to reconcile every time, but I believe I was 23 years old when I got cancer.
10 years ago, young John.
And that took me out of work for a little bit and some other things. And I had 3 rental properties at that time that I bought for $20,000. So I started, very low scale, and I made a few $100s a month on each of them. And that actually helped carry through those months I wasn't working. And so I said, hey, I need a goal. I need a goal that I need a certain amount of income from these properties. So if this were to ever happen again, I don't have to worry about my family. I got married at a young age. I was married at 21. And my wife was going to school at the time. So you start adding all those things up and you're like, I need to protect my family, because with mortgages, if I'm blind tomorrow, it's going to be pretty hard to do mortgages because 90% of my work's on a computer. I'm sure you can figure it out. But, if an event happens that takes me away from being an income earner, that was my motive. And so once the dust settled, I aggressively bought properties from 2008 to the current date. And I think I have, with the recent addition, we're looking at 22 doors, if my numbers are right.
Wow. That's pretty incredible. And that's been over, when did you start buying?
So I got 3 single family properties in 2012, and then I didn't buy anything till 2018.
Do you still have those?
2 of them.
2 of them?
2 of them.
And you bought them for $20,000 a pop?
$23,000 each.
Jeez. Now, when I hear that, I'm thinking like, where you had to buy them couldn't have been good. But that was 2012. The real estate market was it pretty much bottoming out, though, like 2011, 2012?
Yeah, 2012, I would say, is the bottom of the market before it started going up.
Do you have an idea of what they're worth today?
Yeah, so, they are not in the, let's say, the best of areas.
Sure.
So, each of the single families are worth about $100,000 now. So, still quite a lot of appreciation, but still very cheap compared to what your average homeowner is buying today.
Yeah, 100%. But you bought your first properties basically 12 years ago is what it comes down to.
Yep.
So you went from having no doors to 22 doors in 12 years, which is, on average that's almost 2 doors a year. And you don't have to share if you don't want to, but do you have an idea of what your real estate portfolio is valued at today?
It's a great question. I would say north of 3 million, but I have to look.
Yeah. But that's incredible. In 12 years, you've created 3 million of value to your net worth. Like, that's, if I could go to myself 12 years ago, which that would have been before I could actually start buying real estate, but we'll say 10 years ago, I would have said, Ben, start buying at least a duplex a year. Just make it happen. I'm starting a little bit later, which is fine. Everybody starts their journey when they start it, but that's just incredible. So I do want to touch on this subject a little bit more if you're comfortable with it. You got cancer. You said that was what year again?
I think I was 23, so that would have put it like 2013. It was like a year after I got married, and I got married in 2012.
Okay. So how did that feel?
It didn't feel great. You're sitting in the doctor's office. They come back with the results, and, they're all quiet and everything. And they say you have cancer, and you kind of just feel like the bottom fell out. I was there all alone. I wasn't with anybody at the time. So, it just was a 23-year-old boy sitting there. It's just a lot to take in.
Yeah, I can't imagine. 23 years old, you're just getting into adulthood, really. You had done a lot before that too, which we can go further back to talk about some of that as well. But at 23, you're told you have cancer. What's some of the first things that went through your mind?
Just lots of questions like, what do I have to do? First it's like disbelief. Like, you don't think at 23 that's going to happen, right? Like, you feel pretty invincible at 23. I was very healthy. I was working hard. And so you just get news like that, and it's an instant paradigm shift.
Mm-hmm.
And so you after the shock and disbelief go away, you start asking questions, like, well, what do we have to do? How do we overcome this? What does treatment look like? What is prognosis? I'm a huge numbers person. So like, I want to know those things. I don't care if it's 99% or 1%. I still want to know the odds, and I will always fight to defy the odds. So, I did tons and tons of research, changed my diet. I literally lost like 25 pounds in 4 months from diet change alone, because like I ate no red meats. Everything was like as healthy as you could be. So most of it was just the internal struggle. I was very fortunate with my cancer that I didn't have to undergo additional treatments outside of an operation for removal, but I did have 5 years of heavy surveillance with CT scans constantly and blood work, monthly for the first couple of years, because they wanted me to do chemo, but I thought that the pros and cons of chemo was that you will most likely end up with another cancer 20 years later. So I didn't want to take that risk, and that's why I took the really active maintenance approach. And I mean, I didn't have to do any additional treatment, so I'm happy that that's the direction I chose.
Yeah, absolutely. And you haven't had any like recurrences since then?
No. So 5 years of surveillance, and then you're kind of done.
Thank God.
Don't have to go in anymore.
Absolutely. So when you had cancer, how long would you say you were, out of work for, that you weren't able to create any?
Yeah, so from the operation and everything, 3 to 6 months, because I was in construction, so very physical type of work. And then, obviously lots of appointments, which takes you away from work because you got to go in for blood work and doctor's appointments and CTs, and they would stack them all on a day, so it would be like a whole day.
So 3 to 6 months, I mean, that's still a pretty good amount of time. Like, what did you do I know you mentioned you had some money coming in with the rentals and everything, but how did you keep your family afloat?
Yeah, so, I mean, because I've always been an aggressive saver, I mean, we definitely had a warehouse of money, let's say, to get us through the time. It wasn't a ton, but it was enough to at least get through the time, get back to work without completely depleting the savings. But, most of it, I went back to trading a little bit. So like, what could I do while I was recovering, right? Because I didn't want to just sit there and take it.
And what were you trading?
So I would trade the futures market, which is, I would do like commodities like gold, silver, the SP index, bonds, etc. And I wasn't comfortable with the platform that I was trading on. I didn't really know all the mechanics. I knew how to trade because I did that for several years, but I got burned really bad because I wasn't quite familiar with the program, and then I stopped altogether and just wrote it out.
Yeah, for sure. So trading, I just want to quickly touch on it. It's not a super easy thing to do. So where did you learn how to do it? And I mean, I know we've talked about you've traded gold and silver. Where did you learn how to do all of that?
Yeah, so I mean, there's twofold to that. One, I had a mentor from my church that told me how to trade physical gold and silver. So I would buy stuff like on eBay, locally, etc., and then I would take that to a refiner, and I paid less than what I got paid. So that's how profit was generated. Later on, I realized there's a cap. You can only buy so much physical stuff. So I started training myself to learn the markets so I could do everything online. So where I actually used a trading platform to trade gold and silver, I think at the time it was E-Trade or Ameritrade. It might even been Scott's Trade, actually, before it was merged with other companies. And so, I took all the experience of the buying the physical, brought it to the market because I was acutely aware, like, every day I was watching the screen. So I had thousands of hours of watching how the markets respond to the news, the Fed, the housing market, all those things. So I just took those skills and then started trading.
It made me think about, you had told me that you went to the University of Wisconsin-Whitewater. You double majored in finance and economics. Am I right there?
Yep.
What year did you graduate again?
You're asking the hard question.
Yeah.
I think I graduated in 2006, I think.
Really?
I mean, 2016.
2016.
Yeah.
It's just funny because we were likely at Whitewater at the same time. We just didn't know each other yet.
Yeah.
So, and I know you commuted and everything too. So, just decided to put those two pieces together there. So awesome. You traded a little bit, and then you went back to work. What were you doing then?
So that's when I was doing construction. I started flipping houses in 2012, and that's how I acquired the first 3 rentals.
Mm-hmm.
And the housing market sucked in 2012. I mean, it would take 6 months to sell a house, even when you were priced appropriately. It was just there wasn't buyers, unlike this market.
What were rates like then?
Rates back then, I think they were 5-ish.
Oh, beautiful.
I started doing the flips, and people liked my work. And so I put 2 and 2 together that I didn't like investing all this money and cash into real estate and doing the work to risk it to the market at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Flipping back then was very different than flipping today. So because people liked my work, I started specializing in kitchen and bathroom remodels, and I could make almost the same profit guaranteed by just doing the work for someone else. So I did that for several years before I got into the mortgage space.
Yeah, that's something that I was going to ask next. I know you're definitely one of the, in my opinion, and probably most people you talk to from our office and throughout like Southeast Wisconsin, you're likely one of the top mortgage lenders around here. And you started in, I want to say, was it 2020?
2020.
And it's beginning of 2024 right now.
Yep.
So I want to start here. What even brought you from construction, buying, flipping homes, of course, buying properties? You started buying again in 2018 for rentals, you said?
Mm-hmm.
What changed where you're like, I'm done with construction and I'm going to risk it all and become a mortgage lender? Because as we all know, real estate professionals, mortgage professionals, we don't get paid a salary. We don't get paid for showing up. We don't get paid for our time. We get paid on how we perform, and that means we close business. Mm-hmm. So knowing you're a saver, I'm sure you saved up some money. But what made you want to just say, I'm going into mortgages, let's do this? Yeah,
so, I mean, I loved a lot about construction. It's really fulfilling to be able to do a project and see the fruits of your labor right away. Like, wow, that kitchen looks amazing compared to what it looked like. Mm-hmm. With construction, one of the drawbacks, especially as being a business owner with it, is I had a lot of time away from family. Mm-hmm. Because you have to physically be there, unless you really grow a company where you can be an absentee owner, which isn't very common in small business construction.
Right.
So, with all those hours away, kids start growing up and you realize, hey, I got to make some priority shifts here. And in 2020, when COVID happened, we were doing some projects on the east side. We were remodeling triplexes that had student housing. And the students were really nervous, right? Because we had these mandatory shutdowns of, you got to stay home, can't go out. And so we had a month off of doing that. I contacted the property owner and said, hey, although construction is a classified thing that you can still do, everybody's kind of nervous. Why don't we just take a month break and recalibrate? And during that month, my wife happened to be off too. And I just had time with the family, and I realized that, hey, this is pretty nice. And it was something I was missing. You don't really know what you're missing until you don't either lose it or you have a paradigm shift or circumstance change that allows you to see what you're missing out on. And so with that, there's a good friend of mine that reached out to me. He was wanting me to do it for years and presented the opportunity. And I was debating between being a real estate agent and a mortgage professional. And mortgage professional felt like a better direction because of just the numbers and things I do. So that's what got me introduced to A Plus Mortgage. And from there, it was my forever company of day one.
So you started at A Plus, right?
Yep.
And you've been there the whole time. That's awesome. What do you like best about A Plus?
Yeah, some of my favorite parts are, it comes down to we have incredible owners that are there helping your business every day. When you run into difficult, challenging things, they are a springboard for ideas. They're always there to support you, but, they're business owners. So if you don't ask, you don't get help. I'm one to ask the question. So, being a smaller company, it's just nice to have the whole inner family working together to accomplish the task at hand. Because as you know, in real estate, we run into a lot of problems.
Every day.
Like clients can have their own things going on personally. We can have things go wrong with the property, appraisals, inspections. There's so many things that can go wrong. Job changes. So, having the support of active owners where you can have an executive level decision the same day you have let's say a crisis, is incredible.
100%. Yeah. And speaking of problems, I just thought of this. I don't think that we've ever had a client together that has had the same problem. It's always something different, always something new and fun. And, it's always a challenge. And it's really important to have someone you trust that has your back. And I know when I work with you and a few others, of course, like, especially with you though, like I know that you always got my back. So I want you to know I always appreciate that.
I appreciate that.
So
likewise for you.
Thanks, bro. So want to touch on, in the beginning, when you started, it was 2020 when you started mortgage lending. Now it's 2024, and we know there's like a few differences in the marketplace, right? One major difference, not to go back too far, but we had 2.5%, 3% interest rates then, and now they're, I think we talked about the other day, it's like really around 7+ right now. How different does the market feel from when you first started to now?
Well, it's incredibly different because one, there was a ton of refi business when I started. So it was great springboard to get my feet wet, get experience on a volume scale right from the beginning. But at this point, when interest rates have more than doubled, there is really very limited refi business. It might be at the divorce situation or a circumstance rather than I want to get a better rate.
Yeah, exactly. Nobody's refinancing now unless there's like a serious life reason for that to happen. But back in 2020, people were refinancing left and right to go from wherever they were at down to 2.5, under 3. I bought a house in even 2021 and I had a 3% interest rate. And I remember how amazing that was. I don't have it anymore, as you know. Sometimes I think I should have held on to the property, but I know that I'm really happy with where Tiff and I and the girls are at now. And our rate's not too bad. It's a 5%, all thanks to your help too on that. So, it definitely is a different market than 2020. Anything else that you feel is different?
So refi, that's 50% of the business as far as I'm concerned. So then we have the purchase market, and as you know, we have pretty compressed inventories, which means sales don't happen as frequent or as abundant as they were in 2020. I think if we look back at the numbers, that there's 30% more sales activity than there is today.
Yeah.
For various reasons, right? Borrowers can be scared because interest rates are higher. with the prices of homes going up. There's so many things that go into that mix. But what I like about our industry is the purchase market's forever. No matter what, people are moving. They have to buy a home, whether they're coming from Ohio because of work transfer, a divorce situation, buying their first house, upgrading because they now have another child in addition in their family. It's a market that will always be there, even though it is a little bit more challenging with current conditions.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say this year so far, I don't think we've ever worked harder. I mean, we work hard all the time, but right now it's definitely a challenging market to navigate. I just know, like, just a handful of people we're working with together, it's inventory's light, and we're out there literally hunting for inventory just to find it for them. Yeah, so let's switch gears a little bit. You became a mortgage lender. Here we are 4 years later, and you and I, we both know we work a lot. I see you in the office pretty much every day. I think it is every day because we're both there from early in the morning till most of the times late at night, although I've been working really hard to get home to my family 5 to 5:30 every night. And I know you do the same. So how do you balance a successful like mortgage business running your whole real estate portfolio? I know you don't do it all yourself and you have property managers, but you're still involved in some of that, and also taking care of your wife and kids. How do you balance all that?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is I don't think you ever have a balance.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's skewed at times. Like there's a season where real estate is really busy.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a time where it's not so busy. So what I like is during the winter months, November through December, normally is like a slower time of the year,
Mm-hmm.
which is really nice to get that family time in, especially around the holidays. Like it couldn't be more perfect. We've had a really unusual start to December, January, and February in the sense that I haven't had tons and tons of closings, but I've had more applications than I've ever had. And I think it's because we're getting all this pressure from the market of people are getting kicked out of their rentals, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So when we're talking about the workload, you have that seasonality part of it, but then you also have that the constant battle of, how much time do I invest in each thing I'm doing? And sometimes that means that I have a vacancy at a property longer than I would if I was on my A game, because I'm making a conscious choice to either be with my family, mortgage, whatever is really demanding my attention. Like you, I really have been trying to leave the office by like between the 4 and 5, because people get home at 5 and they start calling me, right?
My gosh, yes.
Because they're home from work. So now they have their questions, they want to proceed or whatever they need. So although I'm working almost as many hours as when I did construction, the difference is I'm at least at home.
Mm-hmm.
So like I can pull out the laptop, take care of it, and then go sit and eat dinner and then come back to it if I need to, versus what I was doing prior. Like if you're gone, you're gone. There is no, time out.
Yeah, let me go quick have dinner with the wife and kids and get back to work. It's definitely easier to do that in our field of work where, it's always there. And sometimes that can be a problem with it always being there. I've definitely found myself in the past just like never being able to shut off, and I've 100% turned that around and have been able to disconnect. How would you say that you have found ways to be able to just like put work down and truly be with your wife, be with your kids, and disconnect from things? Or if you haven't, we can talk about that too.
It's a challenge. I mean, there are the moments I feel like I can do that. I would say more often than not, I feel preoccupied. It's very difficult. Like it is a conscious choice to be present, mm-hmm. because you have all these things pulling at you all the time. So, I wish it was as simple as like flipping a switch. But it's the fact that you at least try to do your best with it. I think that's all you can do. And I mean, we're both in the same season of life where we have young kids, which is a little bit more demanding,
Yes.
but also like the level of presence may not be as important as when they start getting 8+, where they start asking more questions and really notice what you're doing. Obviously, it's always great to be present for all ages, but it's something that is a constant struggle. And we've hired some more support this year to be able to help. And we'll have to hire more if it keeps going, because the goal is we don't want to work to live. We don't want to live to work. We want to work to live.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. You have to make the conscious effort to be present and to disconnect. And for me, sometimes that looks like I get home and I actually put my phone up in my bedroom, because if I don't, I will have all the calls. I'll get all the text messages, the emails. And if I have my phone with me, it's going to be too easy for me to be like, oh, babe, sorry, I got to take this call right now. It's important. But sometimes, like, to me, I've noticed that it can to my wife be like, hey, babe, I got to take this call because it's more important than spending my time with you right now. When obviously that's not the case. But you do it enough, you do it every single day, that's eventually what it's going to feel like to them. So one thing that I've learned, and I think even you have said to me, that with it being real estate, nobody's dying. Nothing's on fire unless it's one of your own rentals. And you hope that doesn't happen.
Right.
But in most cases, if it's like 8 o'clock at night, it's not an emergency. And if it is, it's because somebody wasn't doing their job right, whether it be me or a different like partner that I'm working with. When you get home and you're with your family, what are the types of calls you're getting typically? Like, is it from agents that are like, hey, I need a pre-approval right now, or is it a customer who's got questions? What does that typically look like for you?
Yeah, I would say 9 times out of 10, it's customers getting off of work and they're asking about the documentation you're requesting, or about their application or status update, just various things associated, or like, we want to write an offer, but what's the rate look like today and what's our monthly payment? And they're semi-urgent things, because if we're writing, we got to be comfortable with what that mortgage is going to look like before we have confidence to sign on the dotted line.
Yeah. And you have to be there for things like that a lot of times. And that is like you said, it's not always a balance. Sometimes it's, right now we're in our busy season and we have to handle everything into the later hours of the night. And then come November, December, it's, we experience a lot of times it's like crickets around, especially in the office at that time. Mm-hmm. So let's switch gears a little bit here. And what do you do to like stay active and stay fit right now? Like, I know that you've done some crazy things over the last year. One being you ran a marathon that I'm pretty sure you didn't do an insane amount of training for. So that was crazy. You did 75 hard. I think that was in this last year.
2 years ago.
2 years ago? Geez, that feels like it just happened.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about some of those things that you've done.
Yeah, so circling back to the balance, very unbalanced with the health. So like last year I did almost no exercise except the training for the marathon, which I started in June, and I did that all the way through December. I ran the marathon earlier this year, and I really have done minimal activity since then. I definitely struggle having the daily discipline, and so it's part of the reason why I subscribe to do a 75 hard mm-hmm. or to do a marathon, because I know if I don't do some form of training, like, it's not possible to do. You wouldn't just wake up and go climb Mount Everest, right? No. You got to do certain training. So I'm the one that I need the motive of like a greater goal other than the sense of just I'm exercising to be healthy. I struggle with that big time.
For sure. No, and I totally can resonate with you on that, because like I am a part of two different types of like I guess you could call them like some kind of like X many day challenges. So I'm in 75 hard for a real estate challenge, which is only weekdays, and that technically goes from like beginning of February to mid-May, and that's more real estate. And then I'm a part of a different type of mastermind, which is with a bunch of like faith-based entrepreneurs, and we're in a 90-day challenge right now, and it's to reach a certain goal, right? Having those types of like accountabilities in place, and signing up for a marathon and doing 75 hard, that is like the most accountability that you're gonna find, unless you have some sort of like actual trainer training you too. It's heavy accountability, and I know for people like you and me, it's like the accountability exists because of how driven we are when we get some sort of when there's an end goal there. Like, we're gonna hit it no matter what. I know that's how you are. So what else are you doing right now? Like, what's your next thing? Whether it be health, business, family, what do you have lined up for this year?
Yeah, I'm in the process of figuring that out right now. One thing I know I want to sign up for is what's called like a dopey race, which is where you run like a 5K, then the next day a 10K, then a half, and then the marathon. And it's at Disney, just like the marathon was.
Yeah.
And I've been talking to my girls. They wanna run the 5K, which like part of doing the Disney race is like every mile. They call it Magic Mile, and they have something special, and I know the kids would like it. So that's one thing I know I want to sign up for, and then I'm debating what other things we sign up for to keep me going throughout the year instead of just the end of the year.
Absolutely. Well, if you need anything from me, you know, I'll challenge you to something. As we wrap up here, I thought of some stuff, and we're bouncing around a little bit here, but this last year was a heck of a year for you. Am I right? Mm-hmm. And I mean, business-wise, we had an interesting year. It was a good year regardless. But you had some health things going on, and do you want to talk about that at all?
Yeah, so I mean, back in June of I think it's June, my wife went to a chiropractor, and she had some artery dissections, which caused a stroke. Again, one of the, stroke and cancer are probably the two scariest words in the medical world. And so, like, you don't really think that is possible when you're in your young 30s. So as great as business was last year, it also had its challenges and setbacks because, the family had needs, and family comes over business all day, every day. So with that, the stroke is kind of a one and done thing, but you have some long-term effects from a stroke. We're very blessed in the sense that she has full motor skills, memory, everything. She has some blindness in her left eye, but beyond that, there isn't really a distinguishable deficit. But I think the scary part is that it happened, and with an artery dissection, that's basically where your artery tears the inner wall of your artery, and it can happen again. And until imaging confirms that it's healed, it's a fairly scary process for those that have that happen to them, because it's not like I get a scab, right, and I can watch it heal. We're talking something internally that only getting thousands of dollars of imaging can show progress. So it's that unknown part in medical conditions that is always the most exhausting, because, with cancer, is it coming back? Is it not? Am I cured? Am I not? Am I going to have another stroke? Am I not? Like, is my leg being numb a sign or not? You have all these fears that, enter your mind, and you really have to learn how to retrust your body, recalibrate, and be comfortable with your new norm. Otherwise, you're going to shut down, and life is going to be forever changed in a very negative way.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember getting the call from you when this happened, and I was instantly just praying for you guys, and was afraid because you don't talk to somebody every day where, at the age of in their 30s, they get a stroke. So how old was your son when this happened?
Yeah, he was like 6 months old. So he was still breastfeeding at the time. She had to stop that because of certain medications. So, as a young mother, there's so much that they do, right? You and I both work a lot, and our wives are the staple of the house. Like, they take care and hold the fort down.
100%.
And so, you have all those things where she had such a lifting restriction where you don't hold your baby the same way for 6 months. So a lot of challenges with those items. But she's always remained positive and strong throughout it, and continually is getting more and more comfortable with the current situation and where we are.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm very glad that you're as back to 100% as you can at this point, right? So if you were to put a word or a few words to last year, I guess what would you call it? What would you say?
Yeah, single words are always hard. When I think of a few things come to mind, one of them is trust. Like, when things go wrong, we often turn to God to help us navigate it, right? When we have the unexplainable happen to us. So a huge part of it was trusting that things are going to be okay, that the family's going to be okay, that Brittany's going to be okay. I mean, we had a baby that year, stroke, everything else. So, trust and change are probably the two biggest things for last year, because we did have a lot of changes, not only adding to the family, but with the health thing. So those would probably be my biggest words to define last year.
Absolutely. Yeah. And in those situations, there really isn't, you can feel helpless. And, I know your background in faith and mine, like, you have to trust in God in those situations and know that he'll always provide for you. He will always get you through. And sure enough, in my opinion, he's delivered. Like, would you say?
Oh, we're so blessed. I mean, is it unfortunate? Yes. So was me getting cancer. What's fortunate is that I don't have cancer anymore. Like, a lot of times you focus on all the negativity, and that is just a dark hole. There's nothing good coming out of negative thinking other than more negative thinking. And I know that's really hard when you're going through something, because you do feel like you're in the black hole.
Yeah.
We had such an outreach of support with people in the office making meals, which for me, like, was such a big deal because it meant so much for my wife. Like, I can go out and buy things, but they're waiting on me. But having a home-cooked meal to provide your family is a very big deal to the woman in the household.
Yeah.
And so, like, having her touched and seeing the support and everything that is what was so important to me in the equation. It's just amazing to see how many people really care and are there to support you when you need it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's super important, and we have a really good community around us, and I know I've always got your back, and that was a really tough time for you guys, and I'm glad you got out. And the one thing that I noticed with you though too is I've never seen you take a victim mentality on any of it. Things happen where some people might be like, poor me, I can't believe things like this keep happening to me. And you easily could have. Like, nobody would have blamed you, right? Like, you had cancer, your wife had a stroke. It really is tough things that not every family deals with in a 10-year span, let alone an entire lifetime. So how do you feel like you've avoided taking that victim mentality? How do you stay out of that?
I think it comes down to just being grateful. Like, again, we can focus on the negative, and the negative is loud. Like, the bad things in our life are tin freaking cans, right? And the good things are like soft and sweet in the background. It's like the ray of sunshine that when it's on you, sometimes you take it for granted until it's like totally gone. And so just being grateful for all the positivity that comes out of it, because we can't change the event. The event happens, whether it's the accident, the illness, whatever, the event, can't change it. But what we can is focus on what we can still do. All the positive things, like there's very little alterations Brittany needs to make for the rest of her life. You know, a lot of it is going to come down to becoming comfortable mentally with a new norm, and that this has happened to her. But I mean, she's been a fighter through it all. She's stepped up in every way. And yeah, we're going to have those bad days. We definitely want to always focus on positivity, but like, it's okay to just break down and say, this is just tough, and talk to people about it and be real, because there's no false front we can put. Like when we're going through shiz, you're going through it. Like it's real. Like you can pretend to be tough, but it's okay to be vulnerable and just say, hey, I'm going through this right now. I appreciate your support. If I reach out to you, can you help me?
Right. Yeah, it's so important to be able to go to other people and say, hey, I need your help, instead of just puffing out your chest every day saying, I got this. So it's great that you recognize that and everything. And let's wrap things up. I know you got a busy rest of the day for yourself too. And on this last note, do you have any major goals this year? Anything that you're looking forward to, just to end on a positive note here?
Yeah, I mean, for goals, I'm excited to sign up for that run, push myself to another new limit, because the marathon was very challenging.
Yeah.
But you get inspired because you see all these people, different sizes, shapes, ages, and they're all doing it. So I've never been a goal setter in the sense of, I want to make this much money or do this many family vacations. I have always set my standards on like, what do I want my daily activity to look like? So that might mean making the effort to be sitting at the table every night for dinner, you know? So yeah, I'd love to leave the office at 4:30 to be with my family every day, but as long as I'm at the dinner table, you know, that I'm doing something towards health on a daily basis. It's that consistency that I'm looking for across the board of, you know, the habits that lead to the life that I want by my design.
Absolutely. Well, John, I really appreciate you coming on the show. The first ever episode of this podcast that we don't have a name for yet, but thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you as a friend, as a partner, and just who you are in general. So thank you.
Thank you for having me, Ben.
Thank you everyone for joining us on the show today, where we talked about real estate investing, mortgages, and John's life. Be sure to like and subscribe and follow us for the next one.